This is the story of Morgan Freeman's most humiliating night that Hollywood tried to bury and forget. March 29, 1987, at the prestigious Beverly Hills Hotel, the red carpet premiere of Street Smart was about to begin, a film that had earned Freeman his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor just days earlier. The entertainment industry's elite had gathered to celebrate what was being hailed as Freeman's breakthrough performance, the role that would finally establish him as a serious dramatic actor worthy of Hollywood's highest honors. Yet, the man whose powerful performance had earned critical acclaim and Oscar recognition would spend this triumphant evening fighting for basic dignity and respect at the entrance to his own movie premiere. Freeman arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel at 7:30 p.m., dressed impeccably in a custom-tailored black tuxedo, his Oscar nomination pin gleaming on his lapel, carrying himself with the quiet confidence that had become his professional trademark. He had spent the afternoon with his publicist and agent, discussing strategy for the evening's interviews and photo opportunities that would capitalize on his recent Oscar nomination, and help position him for future leading roles that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The premiere represented more than just another publicity event. It was Freeman's formal introduction to Hollywood's A-list, his admission into the exclusive circle of actors whose names alone could greenlight major studio productions. As Freeman approached the hotel's main entrance, he expected the smooth, deferential treatment that Academy Award nominees typically received at such high-profile industry events. The red carpet was lined with photographers, entertainment reporters, and film industry executives, all waiting to celebrate the man whose gritty portrayal of Fast Black had earned widespread critical praise and transformed him from a character actor into a genuine star. However, as Freeman reached the entrance to the hotel, two security guards stepped forward to block his path, their body language immediately communicating suspicion and hostility rather than recognition or respect. "Excuse me, sir," said the taller guard, a man in his 40s whose nameplate identified him as Ronald Harrison. "This is a private event. You'll need to show identification and proof that you're on the guest list." Freeman paused, initially assuming this was simply standard security protocol that all attendees would experience, and reached into his jacket pocket for his invitation. The formal invitation, printed on heavy cream-colored paper with gold lettering, clearly identified him as the film's star and guest of honor, including specific instructions about his arrival time and designated seating in the theater. "Here's my invitation," Freeman said calmly, extending the elegant document toward Harrison. "I'm Morgan Freeman, one of the stars of the film we're celebrating tonight." Harrison barely glanced at the invitation before handing it back with a dismissive gesture that immediately signaled this interaction was about something other than standard security procedures. "Anyone can get one of these printed up," Harrison said with thinly veiled contempt. "We need to see some real identification and verification that you're actually supposed to be here." The second security guard, a younger man named David Chen, according to his badge, stepped closer with his hand resting on his radio, clearly prepared to call for backup if Freeman proved to be what they obviously considered a potential troublemaker attempting to crash an exclusive Hollywood event. Freeman felt a familiar tightening in his chest as he recognized the tone and body language that he had encountered countless times throughout his life, the assumption that a black man in an expensive suit must be either a servant, a criminal, or someone pretending to be more important than his race would naturally allow. "Gentlemen," Freeman said, his voice maintaining the controlled dignity that had served him through decades of similar encounters, "I understand you need to verify attendance, but I'm Morgan Freeman, and this is my film premiere. Perhaps you could check your list or contact the event coordinators." He pulled out his California driver's license, his Screen Actors Guild card, and a letter from his agent confirming his status as the evening's guest of honor, hoping that multiple forms of identification would satisfy whatever concerns had prompted this unusual scrutiny. Harrison examined the documents with exaggerated suspicion, holding Freeman's driver's license up to the light, as if checking for forgeries, while Chen maintained his hostile stance, with hands still positioned near his radio. The red carpet activity continued just yards away, with other attendees, all of whom were white, flowing freely into the hotel without any requests for identification or verification of their invitation authenticity. Freeman watched as studio executives, minor celebrities, and entertainment industry figures he recognized but had never met passed effortlessly through the same entrance where he was being detained and questioned like a potential criminal or imposter. These could be fake, Harrison announced after his prolonged examination of Freeman's perfectly legitimate identification. We've had problems with people trying to sneak into these events pretending to be actors or industry people. You understand we have to be careful about security. The implication was unmistakable. A black man claiming to be the star of a major Hollywood film was inherently suspicious and required extraordinary verification that would never be demanded of white attendees. Freeman felt anger rising in his chest, but he also recognized the delicate nature of his position. He was still relatively new to A-list status. His Oscar nomination was his first major recognition, and to any public confrontation or scene at his own premiere could damage his carefully cultivated reputation for professionalism and dignity that had been crucial to his career advancement in an industry that was already skeptical about black actors' commercial viability and mainstream appeal. Perhaps you could call someone from the studio or check with the event organizers, Freeman suggested, his voice remaining calm despite his growing frustration and humiliation at being publicly questioned and delayed while other guests continued to enter freely. I'm sure they can confirm my identity and my status as tonight's guest of honor. Harrison and Chen exchanged glances that clearly communicated their shared assumption that Freeman was attempting to talk his way into an event where he didn't belong, despite the mounting evidence of his legitimate claim to be exactly who he said he was. The interaction had already lasted several minutes, long enough for other attendees to notice the commotion and begin pointing and whispering about the well-dressed black man being detained at the entrance. Freeman could see photographers beginning to turn their cameras in his direction, sensing that something newsworthy might be developing, though none of them seemed to recognize him as the evening's honoree, despite his recent Oscar nomination and the publicity campaign that had accompanied it. The hotel's general manager, a nervous man named Thomas Whitfield, eventually appeared at the entrance after being alerted to the situation by other staff members who had witnessed the prolonged detention of someone who was obviously well-dressed and articulate, even if his race made his claims of celebrity status seem questionable to the security personnel. Whitfield approached the group with the cautious demeanor of someone trying to resolve a potentially embarrassing situation without taking clear responsibility for the discriminatory treatment that had created it. Froth. Is there a problem here? Whitfield asked, his tone carefully neutral as he tried to assess the situation without immediately taking sides in what could potentially become a public relations disaster for the prestigious hotel if mishandled. Freeman turned to address the manager directly, hoping that someone in an official capacity would be able to resolve the situation quickly and allow him to attend his own premiere with some remaining dignity intact. I'm Morgan Freeman, he explained patiently. This is the premiere of my film Street Smart, for which I received an Academy Award nomination last week. I have my invitation, multiple forms of identification, and confirmation from my representation, but your security staff seems to believe that my presence here is somehow suspicious or illegitimate. Whitfield glanced at the documents Freeman offered, then looked at the two security guards whose defensive postures made it clear they were not prepared to acknowledge any error in judgment or inappropriate racial profiling that might have influenced their extended detention of a legitimate guest. The manager found himself in the awkward position of trying to resolve a situation that was clearly based on racial assumptions while maintaining the hotel's relationship with the security company and avoiding any admission that discrimination had occurred. Mr. Freeman, Whitfield said carefully, I apologize for any inconvenience. I'm sure this is just a routine verification process that we apply to all attendees. The lie was transparent to everyone involved. No other guests had been subjected to anything resembling the scrutiny and suspicion that Freeman had encountered, and the routine nature of the verification process was contradicted by the obvious surprise and discomfort that Freeman's legitimate identity had created among the staff who had assumed he was an imposter. However, Whitfield's intervention did provide a face-saving way for the security guards to step aside and allow Freeman to enter, though their grudging compliance made it clear they remained convinced that some kind of mistake or deception was occurring. As Freeman finally walked through the entrance into the hotel lobby nearly 15 minutes after his arrival, he was acutely aware of the stares and whispered conversations of other guests who had witnessed or heard about the confrontation at the door. The incident had transformed what should have been a triumphant entrance into his own celebration into an embarrassing spectacle that reinforced every stereotype about black actors being out of place in Hollywood's elite social and professional circles. The premiere coordinator, a young woman named Jennifer Martinez, who had been frantically searching for Freeman when he failed to appear for his scheduled photo opportunities, rushed to greet him with barely concealed panic about the delay and its potential impact on the evening's carefully orchestrated schedule. "Mr. Freeman, we've been looking for you everywhere," she exclaimed, her relief at finding him mixed with obvious confusion about why he had been delayed. "The photographers are ready for your individual shots, and the director wants to do interviews before the screening begins." Freeman chose not to explain the reason for his delay, recognizing that any detailed account of the discrimination he had experienced would only create additional complications and potentially overshadow the positive publicity that the premiere was designed to generate for his career and the film. Instead, he simply smiled and allowed Martinez to escort him to the designated photo area, where he spent the next 30 minutes posing for pictures and giving interviews, while trying to project the confidence and satisfaction that should naturally accompany such a career milestone. The screening itself passed without further incident, with Freeman receiving enthusiastic applause from the audience of industry professionals and entertainment media representatives who had come to celebrate his breakthrough performance and Oscar nomination. However, the earlier confrontation at the entrance had fundamentally altered his experience of what should have been one of the most satisfying evenings of his professional career. Instead of feeling welcomed and celebrated by Hollywood's elite, Freeman found himself hyper-aware of the racial dynamics in every interaction, questioning whether the smiles and congratulations he received were genuine or merely professional courtesy extended to someone whose success was viewed as temporary or exceptional rather than a natural result of talent and hard work. During the post-screening reception, Freeman mingled with studio executives, fellow actors, and entertainment industry figures, maintaining his characteristic grace and dignity, while internally processing the humiliation and anger he felt about the treatment he had received. Several people made casual references to having seen some kind of commotion at the entrance earlier, but no one directly asked him about what had happened, and Freeman chose not to volunteer any details about the discriminatory treatment that had delayed his arrival. The conspiracy of silence that surrounded the incident reflected the entertainment industry's general reluctance to acknowledge or address racial discrimination directly, preferring to maintain comfortable illusions about meritocracy and equal treatment rather than confronting the persistent barriers that affected black actors' careers and professional experiences. As the evening progressed, Freeman overheard conversations that revealed how his success was being interpreted and contextualized by industry insiders who had attended the premiere to evaluate his commercial potential and future viability as a leading man. Comments about his surprising sophistication, his unexpected range as an actor, and his ability to transcend his background revealed the underlying assumptions about black actors that had contributed to his treatment at the entrance and continued to shape how his achievements were understood and valued by Hollywood's power structure. These coded discussions about his talent and marketability were peppered with references to the limited types of roles that might be available to him despite his Oscar nomination, with several executives expressing doubt about mainstream audiences' willingness to accept him in romantic leads or heroic roles that weren't specifically written as black characters. The evening that should have represented Freeman's arrival as an A-list actor instead became an education in the subtle but persistent ways that racial prejudice continued to operate in Hollywood's highest circles. The security incident at the entrance was just the most visible manifestation of attitudes and assumptions that permeated the entire industry, creating barriers and limitations that would continue to affect his career choices and opportunities despite his critical acclaim and award recognition. Freeman left the premiere that night with a complex mixture of professional satisfaction and personal disappointment, proud of his artistic achievement, but sobered by the reminder that success in Hollywood didn't automatically translate to respect or equal treatment in the broader social and professional contexts where his career would continue to develop. The incident at the Beverly Hills Hotel became a defining moment that crystallized Freeman's understanding of his position in the entertainment industry. Celebrated for his talent, but still subject to the racial prejudices and assumptions that had shaped his entire career. He never spoke publicly about what happened that night, choosing to maintain the dignified silence that had served him throughout his career. But the experience reinforced his determination to use his growing influence and platform to create opportunities for other Black actors and challenge the industry's persistent reluctance to fully embrace racial equality and inclusion. The aftermath of that night at the Beverly Hills Hotel had lasting implications for Freeman's career and his approach to navigating Hollywood's complex racial dynamics. In the weeks following the premiere, word of the incident spread quietly through the entertainment industry's informal networks, creating a mixture of embarrassment among studio executives and sympathy among fellow actors who understood the persistent challenges faced by Black performers, regardless of their level of success or recognition. However, the incident was never reported in the entertainment media, reflecting the industry's general reluctance to acknowledge or publicize instances of racial discrimination that might damage its carefully cultivated image of progressive inclusivity and meritocratic opportunity. Freeman's agents and publicists worked to ensure that the story didn't leak to gossip columnists or entertainment reporters, recognizing that any public discussion of the discriminatory treatment he had received could potentially damage his career prospects by making him appear difficult to work with or overly sensitive about racial issues that many industry figures preferred to ignore or minimize. The careful management of the incident reflected the delicate balance that successful Black actors were forced to maintain between advocating for dignity and equal treatment, while avoiding any perception that they were troublemakers who might bring unwanted controversy to film productions or publicity campaigns. The Beverly Hills Hotel never acknowledged that discrimination had occurred or apologized for the treatment Freeman received, instead maintaining that the security guards had simply been following standard verification procedures that would have been applied to any guest whose identity seemed questionable. This institutional response reflected the broader patterns of denial and deflection that characterized how Hollywood's establishment dealt with racial incidents, acknowledging problems only when absolutely necessary while working to minimize their significance and prevent them from becoming precedents for broader changes in policy or attitude. Freeman's decision not to pursue legal action or public complaints about the incident was influenced by his understanding that challenging powerful institutions in Hollywood could easily backfire and damage his career prospects more than the original discrimination had. The incident became a private touchstone for Freeman's understanding of his place in Hollywood's hierarchy, reminding him that success and recognition were always conditional and subject to revocation based on factors beyond his professional performance or artistic merit. In subsequent years, Freeman used his growing influence and platform to address racial issues in Hollywood more indirectly, choosing projects that featured complex Black characters and working with filmmakers who were committed to realistic portrayals of racial dynamics rather than stereotypical representations that reinforced prejudicial attitudes. His careful approach to advocacy reflected lessons learned from that night at the Beverly Hills Hotel, that confronting racism directly could be professionally costly, but that persistent strategic efforts to change hearts and minds through exemplary work and dignified behavior might ultimately prove more effective in creating lasting change. The premiere incident also influenced Freeman's relationships with other Black actors and entertainers, many of whom had experienced similar forms of discrimination, but rarely discussed them openly due to fear of professional repercussions. Freeman became part of an informal network of successful Black performers who shared information about industry attitudes, warned each other about potentially problematic situations, and provided mutual support when facing racial barriers or discrimination in their professional lives. This network operated quietly and privately, recognizing that public discussions of racial issues could easily be characterized as complaints or excuses rather than legitimate concerns about systemic inequality and unfair treatment. Today, more than 30 years after that night at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the incident serves as a reminder of how far Hollywood has come in addressing racial discrimination, while also illustrating the persistence of subtle biases and assumptions that continue to affect how black actors are perceived and treated in the entertainment industry. Freeman's dignity and grace in handling the situation, combined with his refusal to allow the incident to derail his career or embitter his approach to his profession, became part of his legacy as an actor who overcame systematic barriers while maintaining his artistic integrity and personal values. The story of that night remains largely untold in official Hollywood histories, but it represents a crucial moment in understanding both Freeman's personal journey and the broader challenges faced by black actors seeking full acceptance and equality in America's entertainment industry.